Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Development Control and Regulatory Board. This day, the 10th of December 2020. The meeting will be broadcast live to the public. For those who are not able to watch the footage live, the webcast will be available for viewing on YouTube after the meeting. Due to current situation, all of the members of the board and officers presenting today are joining online. Can I please ask that all officers and members mute their microphone until they wish to speak or are invited to speak? Speaking, please turn your video on. Ewan is now going to go around and ask everyone to introduce themselves. I have been informed that Mrs. Page is substituting for Mrs. Wright today. So over to you, Ewan, to do the roll call of people present. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Bentley, are you on the line?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me, Mr. Bentley? I didn't quite catch what you said.
Sorry, I can both see and hear you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Charlesworth?
Good afternoon, Ewan.
Thank you. Mr. Coxon, you're here. Mr. Crooks, are you on the line? Mr. Bill Crooks, are you on the line? Back to Mr. Crooks. Mr. Gamble, are you on the line? Mr. Gillard, are you there? Preston? Preston, are you on the call?
Ewan, I don't know who it is, but somebody's got something else talking over everybody.
Mr. Harrison, are you there?
Hello, good afternoon, Ewan. Yes, I can see and hear you. Thank you.
Mr. Licorice, are you still there?
Yes, thank you, Ewan. All present and correct.
Page?
I'm here. I can hear and see you. Thank you.
Moore? Mr. Phillimore, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, Ewan, you broke up. Yes, see and hear. Thank you.
Mrs. Richards?
I can hear you and see you, Ewan. Thank you.
Mr. Sheehan?
Yes, Ewan, I can see and hear you. Thank you.
Mr. Wyatt?
Yes, Ewan, I'm here and I can see everybody, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we'll just go back to the ones we've missed. Mr. Crooks, are you on the call now? No, okay. Mr. Gamble? Mr. Gillard? I can see you there, Mr. Gillard.
Yeah, I'm here, Ewan. Thanks, no problems.
Yeah. Okay. So just one last try. Mr. Crooks, have you joined the call yet? Doesn't seem to. Okay, well, we are core, so we can continue without a couple of missing members.
Okay. Thank you, Ewan. It looks like we're absent of Mr. Crooks and Mr. Gamble at the moment, but hopefully they will join us at some point. We move on to the agenda then. Item number 1 then is the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of November 2020. I propose that they're taken as read and confirmed and signed. Are we all agreed with that?
Yes.
Yeah. Agreed, thank you.
Yeah, I wasn't present, Ewan.
Sorry, who was that speaking?
Councillor Phillimore. I wasn't present at that meeting.
Okay, item number 2 then. No questions have been received from members of the public. Item 3, there are no questions from members. Item 4, there are no urgent items. Item 5 is declaration of interest. It is noted that all members who are also members of parish, town or district or liaison committees will have a personal interest in those applications which relate to areas covered by their authorities. Are there any other further declarations at this time? I think the silence means no then. Item 6, petitions. We haven't received any petitions. Moving on then to item 7 is one of the two first application we've got this afternoon. This is being presented by Piers Lindley and Edward McWilliam. This diversion of a footpath or creation of one. So over to Piers and Edwin, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is agenda item 7 on your papers. It relates to an application for a definitive map modification order, which the proposal of which is to add 2 public footpaths to the definitive map near Great Glen. And the actual, as shown on the screen now, there is the proposals, the paths being A to C and B to D. The evidence as submitted with the claim alleges that the 2 paths either subsist or are reasonably alleged to subsist along the routes actually shown by you. The evidence actually relies on user evidence forms that have been submitted to the County Council, and in broad terms they state that the routes concerned have been used as of right by the public for 20 years or more, and as such 2 highways have come into being. Now, the County Council have to have regard to the Wildlife and Countryside Act, and the definitive map is a comprehensive record of all the footpaths, bridleways and types of byways within the county with an attached statement on that. And the authority is also under a duty to consider applications for highways that have not been included on the map that should be included on the map. That, of course, is dependent upon the evidence submitted. And really the issue before the County Council is to decide if the application satisfies the requirements of Section 53. And the Council needs to be satisfied when it considers that evidence whether the case for the application satisfies either of 2 tests which are currently laid out in the framework. The first is that the Council needs to be satisfied that on the balance of probabilities a right of way is more than likely and not to now exist over a land in question. And the second, which has slightly lower standard of proof, is that it's generally accepted to mean that the case has been established to the extent a reasonable person, having properly evaluated the evidence, will conclude there was a reasonable case for right of way to exist. Quite a lot of words there, but basically what we're coming back to is the issue of whether a highway currently subsists or not. This is not about, oh, it'd be nice to create a new path. It's not about, for these people, oh, it'd be nice if a path went between A and B. It's not about us as an authority thinking, well, that must be awkward for the landowner. We really ought not to consider this. It's whether evidence available to us under the respective act actually shows that a highway has come into being through deemed dedication. Now, under the Highways Act, such use where people have been simply using a path, if you like, as of right, it can give to a presumption of dedication. And if the route has been actually enjoyed by the public as of right and without interruption for a full period of 20 years, really at least, then that way can be deemed to have been dedicated as a highway. There is also the opportunity for the occupier of the land or other parties to challenge that and also bring into question that application by referring back to things they might have done, for instance, to stop the public using the path, to sign the path saying there's no highway here, or indeed it's open to a landowner to also register land with the local authority, namely ourselves, which would prevent any applications coming in being under the Highways Act section 31(6). So that's broadly the framework. I'm now going to go over to my colleague Piers Lindley, who's the case officer. He will take you through the case for you to have a look at the evidence available.
Hello, thanks, Ed. So the County Council received an application for this addition of these two routes to the definitive map in 2018, in March of 2018, and it was supported initially by 11 user evidence forms, and then another group of evidence forms was submitted, taking the total up to 21. The route that's claimed, I don't know if you can see the cursor, hopefully you can. The routes of the claim start at point A from public footpath C13 and run along the headland of a large, what was open field, but which is now currently being developed for housing. They cut through the top of the woodland, which is called Glen Oaks, along a farm track and out of a field gate at point C. The other footpath starts at point B, diverging from the main path, and then goes through the woodland for some distance and exits at point D. Here's an aerial photograph of the same. The footpath running along the headland, along the track, and obviously you can't see it, but underneath the trees, an alleged footpath through the woodland. This is the user evidence graph, which shows the alleged usage of the path. The 20 years starts from 2018, when we received the application. It's considered that what perhaps triggered thoughts in people's minds about claiming the right-of-way was the initial proposals to develop the field nearest the village, through which the first part of the footpath passes, and that was in 2016. But actually the first sort of overt action to claim the path and thus bring its status into question was in 2018. We can see from the graph that there is 20 years usage by a substantial number of the people who filled in user evidence forms. This plan shows the housing development in the first field nearest the village of Great Glen. The alleged footpath C109 is where the red dashes are. The developers have not objected to this application. In fact, they didn't comment at consultation stage, but perhaps to ease through their application for the housing development, they appreciated that there was a claim, and so they have allowed provision for a pathway following the claimed route, which they are going to surface with a gravel surface. There's another path which deviates off that path around the site, but that is purely a permissive path for residents. The landowners, represented by Mr. Mitchell, the remaining landowners, the first area of land we looked at is owned by a housing development company. The remainder of the land is owned by Mr. and Mrs. Robinson, and they are represented today by Mr. Mitchell. They contend that they have on occasions erected electric fencing in the large field, which is now being developed, and also that they have on occasion had erected wooden fencing across one of the entrances to the path, and they've provided this invoice as evidence that in 2013 they did pay a contractor to put a fence across one of the entrances to the path at point D on the map. This is actually a photograph of point D. You can see there is a well-trodden path through a gap between a single post on one side and a remnant bit of fence on the other side. At the time of the inspection by officers, there was no structure across the gap. Perhaps discuss the issues relating to this fence later on. The site visit, these are photographs from the site visit. This is the section of alleged path running from point A towards point B through what at that time was an arable field. And you can see on the horizon, that is the Spinney, Glen Oaks, and what appears to be a very well-trodden path along the headland. And that's looking back from a similar situation, but looking backwards towards the village of Great Glen. This is where the alleged paths enter into the northern tip of the woodland, and one route carries on towards point D on the map, sorry, point C on the map, alleged footpath C109, and the other path, C109A, diverges and heads south through the woodland at that point. Again, they appear quite well walked. That's another photograph looking towards point C, where the alleged path follows a rough farm track out to point C, where it exits onto the road through a farm gate. And that's looking back again from that farm gate towards the top of the woodland at point B. Another photograph showing the exit onto the road at point C. Now we turn to the footpath running roughly south-west through the woodland, which appeared to be quite well trodden and relatively self-maintained, vegetation being trodden down. And another photograph as the path heads further southeast and eventually comes out at the point D on the proposal plan. Again, this is the gap which the landowners had a contractor fence across in 2013. And there's a photograph of the entry point at point D from the road. If we go back to the proposal plan. The evidence provided by users, 21 users, suggests substantial use for many years beyond the 20-year period that's necessary. Now, in normal circumstances, that would be sufficient in law to presume the existence of a public right-of-way, but it is possible for a landowner to negate that presumption if they take certain actions, but those actions need to be overt and they need to make their intentions clear to the public. One of the actions that the landowners say they have done is to have electric fencing in the field to prevent the egress and egress of livestock, but also they say having the effect of deterring members of the public from using the alleged paths. The other significant action that was taken, which I mentioned earlier, was to erect a fence across the gap at point D. And there's good evidence that that happened because they have the invoice from the contractor that he put in the fencing. So that doesn't seem to be in doubt. So the question arises, and I think Ed mentioned at the beginning, the means by which people can challenge the presumption that a right-of-way exists. The question arises is, did the landowners do sufficient to actually negate the claim? With the electric fence, it doesn't appear that it had a great impact on the users, because in the user evidence forms, none of them actually mention an electric fence. It could be it wasn't there permanently because livestock wasn't in the field permanently and they walked it when it wasn't there. It could be they negotiated the electric fence by climbing over it. But either way, it appears that they weren't significantly their use wasn't interfered with to a degree where you could say that it was prevented. If we turn to the fence at point D, again, it's strange, but none of the users actually refer to an impediment to their use and mention the fence, but two of the users do actually describe it as a style. One describes it simply as a style and the other describes it as a low style. So it could be that the fence was erected and people clambered over it. So the question as to whether it substantially interfered with use and actually prevented use for a period can't really be proven. It's definitely that there was a fence there for a period. The landowners say that the fence was damaged, taken away, perhaps cut away with a saw. That's potentially what happened, but it's difficult, obviously, to know. The issue is that if people carried on using that gap after the fence was removed, then one could argue that their use wasn't interfered with. They carried on using it. They weren't aware that somebody had fenced it off, perhaps. The issue then is, was it forced entry? Well, if the majority of users walked through the gap unaware of the actions that a person or persons unknown had done to remove it, then they wouldn't be using it by forced entry. And then the next issue with regard to the fence is, did it actually deter use? Did it prevent use? It doesn't appear it did. People carried on using it. Now, if members were to take the view that they felt actually this fence did break the 20-year usage, it interfered with that 20 years, then we'd have to look back and establish whether there was still user evidence sufficient to show 20 years use running up to 2013. Now, from the user evidence table, it can be viewed that if you then have to move your 20-year marker back to the year 1993, you still have 13 people who have used the route allegedly without interruption. So on balance of evidence, it would appear that members of the public have used the route for 20 years or more. They've not had forced entry. They've not had permission. That's agreed by all parties. So the presumption would be there is a right of way. So the question then arises, has the landowner done sufficient to negate that presumption? And it would appear not. The options that a landowner could have taken, which would negate the claim, would be to erect signs at entrances to the path to state that this is not a public right of way. If those signs were subsequently damaged or vandalised or removed, then it's possible under the Highways Act for them to lodge a statutory declaration stating that there's no intention to dedicate a public right of way. There's no evidence to suggest there were signs, and there's no record of a deposited statement. The third thing they could have done, which they argue they possibly have, but it doesn't seem to have been successful, is to have actually prevented access by putting barriers up. But those barriers would have needed to actually continue to prevent access, and that doesn't seem to be what's happened. So on the balance of evidence, officers recommend that an order be made adding these two public rights of way to the definitive map. I don't know if there's any questions.
We'll come to that, Piers and Edwin. Thank you for your presentation. We've received this email system. It's a supplementary report on the application.
Chairman, I apologise for interrupting. I have one question, Mr. Lindley, and it's only in terms of the accuracy of the report. And I think only he can comment upon it, probably. But at page 10 of the report, under paragraph 20...
Didn't like that. Could you wait until you have the chance to speak, please?
Very well, sir. But Mr. Lindley invited questions then. I was...
Yeah. Okay. So I was saying that you should have all received the supplementary report from you and by email of the application. Okay, we have 4 speakers this afternoon on this item. They vary in times, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes and 5 minutes. The first speaker is Mr. Craig Mitchell, on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Robinson, Wrenbury Farm. Are you there, Mr. Mitchell?
I am.
Your 5 minutes. Would you like to start when you feel comfortable to do so?
Well, I was just saying I had a question of Mr. Lindley about one point in his report, which I think may be an error, but I think he ought to clarify it if he would. And it's in paragraph 20 on page 10, which deals with section 31 of the Highways Act 1980. And he says, in this case, the relevant period dates back 20 years from 2003, when the route was blocked by 2 padlocked gates. I question whether the date is correct, and I haven't seen any reference anywhere else to 2 padlocked gates. Any comment on
that? Shall I comment?
Yes, please. We'll use this part of Mr. Mitchell's 5 minutes.
Very quickly then, yes, I have to apologise for that. That is an unfortunate fragment of a previous report that's crept in. So please disregard that last sentence of paragraph 20. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you.
Continue then, Mr. Mitchell, please.
Thank you, sir. I represent the Robinsons, who are the freehold owners of the land at Oaks Road in Great Glen. They purchased Glen Oaks Wood, the land now owned by Miller Homes, the 6-acre field to the east of the wood, and the large field to the north, over which footpath C13 runs, in about 1978. I will refer to the plan that's already been referred to, and the routes A to B to C and B to D. The land land lying to the west of Glen Oaks Wood was sold in late 2019, a year ago, to Miller Homes, and is now being developed. The route A to B was in my client's ownership until 2019, so that was only last year. And indeed, they owned it when the application was made. The route B to D has been used by local residents for some years, but it is not right to say the Robinsons have condoned or simply allowed this to happen. At times in the past, Mr. Robinson has blocked the access at point D, and you've had reference to the Cooper contractor's invoice in 2013. Fencing was put up then, and that was subsequently sawn down by unknown people, and the remnants of the timber used are still there to be seen.
Sorry, Mr. Mitchell, I think we'll have to interrupt because some people can't hear you very well. Chance you to speak more into the microphone.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Okay. I don't know whether everybody else can. Do we have any nods of heads?
Right, I'm sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Attempts to block access at point D into the woodland were futile. Over many years, damage had been caused to the woodland, with wildlife all but extinguished in it, and even fires have occurred there. Motorcycles have been used there as well. And it would have taken, in my submission, a permanent presence on site by the owners to stop determined individuals from accessing the wood. The route B to C on the plan runs along a hedgerow, and this field has been farmed on an ongoing basis by the Robinsons after their retirement by tenants. There is a field gate, as you've seen, a 12-foot wide metal gate at point C. For some time, this gate was chained and padlocked by the Robinsons, and on occasions in the past, the padlock there was superglued by unknown persons, and it remained locked shut as a consequence. This caused damage and expense and great inconvenience. The landowner would always require a substantial gate and secure field gate there. It pedestrians to close that gate. Historically, from point A on the plan, leading west towards Coverside Road, then along the rear boundaries of houses in Coverside Road, but at all times lying to the east of footpath C13, Mr. Robinson has for many years, from about the year 2000, maintained an electric fence in order to prevent stock from getting into the rear of gardens in Coverside Road, and to prevent stock also from wandering onto the footpath C13, but equally to prevent walkers from getting into the field where cattle and other livestock were being kept. This did not happen just occasionally, but over a number of years. During this time, Mr. Robinson suffered theft of batteries and electric energizers for the electric fence, making it ineffective. And eventually, an offer was made by local residents to supply Mr. Robinson with electricity from his garage, and that did happen. And it was as a consequence of that that the electric fencing remained effective and electrified. I should say also that the headland along the top of the Miller Field on the point between the points A to B was just that, a 2-metre headland. It wasn't left there for the benefit of walkers or pedestrians, but it was a requirement from DEFRA, who wanted to see, in standard practice, they wanted to see a 2-metre headland left from the hedge to allow wildlife to continue to flourish there. And that's exactly what happened. So it's not a case of Robinson wanting to provide or intending to provide a footpath area for local residents. Before agreeing to amend the definitive map by adding these footpaths to it, you have to be certain that there's been a deemed dedication of land in question as a highway or public footpath. You have to be satisfied there's been not less than 20 years.
As if you could wrap up.
Sorry? I can't hear you.
You could just summarise your comments and finish, please.
In my submission, there was obvious interruption of use of the land as footpaths on a number of different occasions, and the landowner made it clear he was not dedicating the land as a public footpath. And indeed, paragraph 22 of the report, before you at page 11, prepared by the council's officers, it reads, the interruption need only be of a brief period. Robinson, over many years, attempted to block or prevent use of these footpaths, and without actually putting up concrete walls, it was a frustrating time for him, and he couldn't do it. There are ample other public footpaths.
The 5 minutes, you know, well over 5 minutes now. Thank you. Can I ask members, did they hear what you had to say? There was a bit of a problem with the sound and that. Can everyone hear me even?
Chair. Not very well, Chair. No, not very well. Your microphone is not clear at all.
It seems to be breaking up all the while.
I think for the speakers, Chair, as soon as they turn the head to one side, perhaps to read notes, the audio is lost. So I think any future speakers need to be very careful about speaking directly towards their computer and not to the side.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask, Chairman, if my comments were in fact heard by your members?
Chair, if I may come back on that, I only heard probably about 50% of what Mr. Mitchell was saying because the audio was so bad.
Can I just bring in Mr. Cross then, please?
I would suggest we ask Mr. Mitchell if he would give his 5 minutes again, but it must be 5 minutes.
Agreed. But please speak into the microphone.
Well, I will endeavour to speak directly to the at my computer in front of me. Can you hear me at the moment?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry, it's difficult to hear me. I'm disappointed as well. I've mentioned 3 instances. I've mentioned the the super gluing of the padlock and chain at the gate at point C on a regular basis, and the frustration of the farmer in having to deal with that. Apart from preventing people opening the gate, it stopped him farming his land and indeed tenants. I've mentioned the woodland at point D, where fencing was put up by his contractors in 2013. And I've mentioned also the electric fencing, which was used for a number of years at the back of houses fronting onto Clubberside Road, and also to prevent walkers from walking along from A to B on that land. And that strip of land there, which could be described as a headland, was a requirement of DEFRA, which I did mention, and was not an attempt by Mr. Robinson to provide a nice, comfortable means of walking along the point A to B. He had to provide that to get agricultural grants. It was just a fact of life, and it's common enough in the farming industry. So he made attempts over a period of years on a number of
Mitchell,
occasions.
the last sort of 5 or 10 seconds, you've gone very crackly and we're struggled to hear you again. So you might just want to try again those last 5 or 10 seconds.
We're not doing very well, are we? I'm sorry about this. I was talking about DEFRA. Did you hear what I said about DEFRA?
Just right now, you're absolutely clear. So if you
Clear.
just like that.
Yeah. I was saying that the headland between A and B on the plan was left as such as a requirement of DEFRA, the Agricultural Government Department, and that was to facilitate wildlife and hedges. It wasn't to create a footpath for public use. He put up barriers. He put up electric fences. He had property stolen, had energizers. He had batteries stolen, and he eventually was able to secure an electricity supply from one of the houses on the Clubberside Road. But that was all intended a good farming practice to prevent cattle getting out and to prevent walkers from going in there. And that's what he intended to do at all times. He never, in his mind, thought that he would be involved in a deemed dedication of land as a footpath or a highway. And that was the last thing he intended at any time. I'm not going to go through all this again. He has asked me to speak today. He feels strongly about it. He didn't want to fall out with the residents of Great Glen, and he went out of his way to act in a reasonable way. But he never acknowledged that there were public footpaths there. Those are my submissions.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. The next speaker is Bill Glasper. Are you there, Bill?
Yes, I am indeed, Chairman.
Would you like to start your speech when you're ready? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm Bill Glasper, Chairman of Great Glen Parish Council, and we have over a number of years looked at all the walking places round and about the village, both formal and informal, and it had come to our attention that the route, as you have already seen, was being used unofficially by a number of people, including some of the parish councillors. At a parish council meeting on the 18th of July, the issue was discussed, and we wanted to support an application that would make this a public right of way. And the minute says, we're aware that these pathways have been used for many years by walkers and would fully support them both being adopted as public right of way. That's C109 and C109A on the map. It's Appendix A that you've shown earlier. And just want to endorse everything that the speakers who are supporting this cause, the parish council is fully behind them. And just as a sub-note, I would say that in being chair for 6 years now and previous chair for 4 years in the past, I have no recollection of Mr. Robinson contacting the parish council of concerns about people using his land. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Has any members got any questions for Mr. Glasper on what he said? No, that appears to be no then. The next speaker I've got on my list is Doug Jackson, local resident. Are you there, Doug? Hello, Doug Jackson. Mr. Jackson. Well, no, Mr. Jackson's not. Mr. Jackson, your microphone's on mute.
Oh, for crying out loud. Can I ring him?
Can't hear you now, Mr. Jackson.
Can you hear me?
Yes, if you want to go ahead and speak.
Sorry, technical issue here. Okay. Well, I moved to the village in 2011 with my wife. My daughter was born shortly after that. I think it's these walks through the woods, we found them of enormous benefit.
You've cut out, Mr. Jackson. Are you still there?
He has muted himself.
Mr. Jackson, you're now on mute. You need to unmute yourself. Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Jackson, you're still on mute.
I'm going to try it.
Hello, Mr. Jackson.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Can you hear me now? Oh, crying out loud.
I think we're going to have to move on to the next speaker while we get Mr. Jackson sorted out online. Next speaker I've got is Mick Burton. Mick, are you there?
Hello, yes, I can hear you, Chair.
Good, thank you. Would you like to present your presentation then? You have 5 minutes, Mr. Burton, too.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'd like to. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mick Burton, claimant. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone who has supported the claim, some of whom I know, some of whom I don't. I also especially would like to thank the Parish Council for their backing. All of this demonstrates a broad base of support in our village for the claim, I believe. My thanks too to Piers Linley for a very detailed, thorough, well-balanced and fair report. So much so... Sorry? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hello, can you hear me? Shall I carry on?
Yes, we can.
Right, okay, thank you. My thanks too to Piers Linley for a very detailed, thorough, well-balanced and fair report. So much so that I feel there is little I can materially add, and I'm happy to let the evidence and the report speak for itself. That said, there are a few points I would like to highlight regarding the claim, albeit conscious that my time is limited. I have been a resident of the village for 43 years and have regularly used the alleged footpaths for in excess of 20 of those years. I have never been prevented from using the paths by anyone at any time. I have never encountered barriers or gates or other obstructions. I have never seen private land type notices. Indeed, I have never seen any type of notice. All the user witnesses describe similar experiences to mine. I regularly encounter other villagers using the paths, including dog walkers, families and ramblers. My understanding is, as borne out in Pear's report, that as the footpaths have had continual, uninterrupted and unchallenged use for in excess of 20 years, they now have the status of dedicated footpaths. A definitive map modification order would put the footpaths on the map and confirm them as designated public rights of way. May I respectfully say, with regard to Mr. Mitchell's point concerning the erection in 2013 of a fence, elsewhere described as a stile, at the Oaks Road end of the path through Glen Oaks, that it seems to me, and is verified in the report, that anyone using the path no later than 1993 would in any event have had 20 years uninterrupted and unchallenged use. The user graphs show 12 such folk. Again, personally, I've never encountered a fence or stile during 2013, and I can only speak as I find. The claim is supported by the Parish Council. The alleged paths feature as aspirational footpaths in the Great Glen Neighbourhood Plan as set out in Policy GG18. One of our user witnesses, Paul Green, worked with the Parish Council to take out a tree preservation order in July 2018 on Glen Oaks, at least in part to preserve a pleasant woodland walk for villagers. I think it's significant that Miller Homes agreed as a result of negotiations to keep the alleged footpath C109 open during construction work of its estate in the field through which it runs. Clearly, I would argue in recognition of its worth. Incidentally, I recall this field being arable land for many years. C109A, running as it does through woodland and under overhanging trees, is not unique in this regard in Leicestershire. I have walked many such designated paths marked on OS maps locally. I understand the vast majority of designated public footpaths are maintained at public expense by the local highways authority of the County Council, again as indicated in Pear's report. Finally, the current pandemic has, from government level down, reawakened an interest in walking, whether that be reclaiming lost and historical footpaths as promoted by the Slow Ways Network project, or simply for exercise and recreation. I feel that this claim chimes with all that and would respectfully ask that it be looked on favourably and that the paths be designated for the continued enjoyment and pleasure of villagers into posterity. I'm happy to try to answer any questions there may be by way of clarifying what I have said. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. You're the clearest one today.
Thank you very much.
Any members that wish to ask Mr. Burton a question while he's still on the line? That's no.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Hands up.
Mr. Harrison.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'd like to ask Mr. Burton, because there's been a lot of technical discussion and historical discussion. Have you ever encountered signs prohibiting you access along that land?
Mr. Harrison, I never have. In all my 23 years of usage, no. The answer is plainly no.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dan. Mr. Cross would like to come in.
Thank you very much. I just want to check whether members have had the opportunity to ask Mr. Mitchell if they had any questions on his presentation, please.
Yeah. Are there any questions for Mr. Mitchell? We didn't. We seem to got lost momentum and voice. So are there any questions for Mr. Mitchell on what he said?
Chairman, can I just ask a question, please?
Yes, please do.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Mitchell, do you have any knowledge of how long the alleged fence was in use for before it was alleged broken down? Could you
I really can't say, Mr. Richards, I'm sorry. And the problem is that a farmer is not going to spend time going back and forth looking at woodland. I don't mean that disrespectfully. He's busy milking cows and doing things that farmers do. And eventually he noticed that the fence had been sawn down. There is still the remnants of the old fence there, but whether it was weeks, months, or whatever, I just cannot say. But it did.
I'm sorry, Chairman, I can't really hear what Mr. Mitchell is saying.
Can you hear me now?
I can, yes.
Sorry, I'm getting closer and closer to the microphone. I was saying that the Robinsons, who were active farmers, did not spend time going up to the woodland checking it, so they cannot really say. So whether it was weeks or months or days, I just don't know. But the fencing was sawn down, was removed and taken. Well, it wasn't taken away; it was dumped in the hedge at the side of it.
Yeah, I only asked the question, Chairman, because if it had been reinstated, and so that we had some idea of how long it was still in use. But obviously, if Mr. Mitchell can't answer the question, that's fine. Thank you very much for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to try Mr. Jackson again now. We seem to have lost him halfway through his presentation. So, Mr. Jackson, are you there now?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah. Would you like to start from the beginning then, please, rather than...
I would. It's just computer on slow-mo. I'm on the phone now, so I don't know if you can see me, but right, shall I start now? Hello? Can you hear me still? Yeah. Okay, I'll start. Well, I moved to the village in 2011 with my wife. My daughter was born soon after that, and these walks have been a huge benefit to us, and particularly my daughter. She's loves nature. She's very passionate about the environment. This is a short walk that we can just do from our door, short circular walk. And I think the benefit of these sorts of paths, I don't think it can be overestimated. And obviously they're very heavily used before even we got here. Now, Mr. Mitchell paints a picture that I certainly don't recognise. I don't think anyone using those paths will recognise. When you look at it, the evidence is extremely weak that he puts forward. There's a fencing invoice which looks like fencing repair from 2013. I've never seen anything across that entrance. It's hardly surprising he's had to do some fencing repair in 40 years. The electric fence, well, that field it's alleged to be in has been arable for as long as anyone can remember. And looking at Google Earth photos, it's crops back in 1999. Now, if he did have a fence there, it was intended to prevent people accessing it. He never bothered to replace that with anything all those many years ago. The developer actually, even at the first outline stage, acknowledged the path along the field and incorporated that into his development. Mr. Robinson didn't object to that. I think what's happened is that Mr. Robinson has only become concerned about this path when people are making a legal claim. And also I think because he may potentially have made himself a bit of pariah in the village by selling the land to the developer, he perhaps no longer cares what people think of him. Unfortunately, I'm afraid if this order isn't made, he'll close this path that people have clearly been using unimpeded for many years, simply out of hubris. And for me, I think that both the moral and the legal decision that to be made is very clear. And that's really what I have to say on that.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
Yeah.
Could you just stay on the line just while we see if anyone wants to ask any questions on what you've said this afternoon?
Certainly.
Any questions from anybody? No, okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Jackson. Thanks for ringing in. I know it's
okay. No, thanks for allowing me to speak. Thank you.
I understand that there's been no comments from Mr. Feltham. So now we're going to open it up to members. Anyone wish to speak? Mr. Charlesworth.
Thank you, John. Having heard enough, despite the problems that we've had this afternoon, and read the reports, I'm happy to recommend that we approve the order as per the recommendation on the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Michael, is there a seconder for that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Harrison.
Did you want to speak, Dan?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chairman.
Go ahead then, please.
Yeah, thank you. It's been interesting and quite technical and a lot of emotion, because obviously the landowner probably feels hard done to, and I respect that if he is the landowner. But clearly there's been a lot of demonstrated language and paperwork to demonstrate that clearly there has been a route through that land over many years. It's not something that's just happened over the last year or two. Historically, there is reasonable evidence looking at it, and some of the walkers go back way beyond the 20-year limit. So I'm happy. I'm always sad in these cases. Always somebody who's happy and somebody who's sad, and I feel sad for the farmer. But I just feel, truthfully, if he'd have signposted, if he'd have been more vigorous in defending his land, well, I'd have had to think again. But I don't see that evidence. So I'm very, very happy to second this afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Would you put your hand down? Rosita Page.
Thank you, Chairman. Now, as we always say in planning, every application on its own merit and with an open mind and on the evidence that sits before us. Well, on the evidence that sits before me, I cannot agree with the recommendation, because to me, as of right cannot be proven. And bear with me why I'm saying that. So we have got evidence by filled out forms from people, and even the officer said it's alleged evidence. However, in front of me, I got pictures of identified damage. Damage not only to the woodland, damage to wildlife, damage to somebody's livelihood, and alleged, and I say alleged, criminal damage by Mr. Mitchell of fences taken down, glue, etc. Now, to me, there is also on the pictures evidence of posts, evidence of bills which are provided. Yet, all I've got is a form and the say-so of residents. Now, to me, there is sufficient evidence that puts the question of proving that right or as of rights in doubt. And I have got some other points, bear with me, and that is from experience. I appreciate that in these unprecedented times, there's an emphasis on well-being, but we equally have to support small businesses and industries, and that is a farmer. And here we're putting a livelihood at stake. Also, we know full well that duck fouling is part of a danger to animals. Now, I find it very, very, and I'm very passionate about that somebody who's walking can put an application forward over some private land. I wouldn't like it if somebody walked over my back garden, and no doubt the applicants wouldn't do so. But my main point is that I have found from experience that it has been very, very difficult for the council to enforce orders, to enforce agreements made with developers. And all of that falls onto the county council. And it falls on the resources of our offices, and it falls on our resources. We are in financial constraints at the moment. On top of that comes COVID restraints. And here we are agreeing to taking on a path that will cause not only additional resource involvement from our offices, but a financial commitment from this council. I don't think we have, with our limited resources, to sustain that. But that is only a by the by and a comment which is not relevant to the evidence before me. So, in my humble opinion, as of rights cannot be proven by simply a few forms when I have got evidence and bills to the contrary in front of me. Sorry. I cannot agree to approving this request. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosita. The next speaker I've got is Bill Crooks. Mr. Crooks, are you?
Thank you, Chairman. Looking at the evidence, and it is fairly balanced, I think, but I think on the outcome of the balancing, I'm in favour of the footpath and the residents. Having said that, coming from a rural area, what really worries me of this outcome, and we've seen a number of these footpath challenges over the years at this committee, is I wonder how many farmers are aware of the amount of effort they have to put in to try and prevent people establishing these footpaths. Short of going down there with a shotgun every day to stop them, you know, what can they do? As I said this morning in the briefing, we've seen fences broke. I've seen people climbing gates and all sorts to walk across fields. But you know, it don't mean to say that that footpath should be there. And same with this virus situation we're in. We put on our playing fields, we put up posters. They take them down every day. We've given up. So you know, what does a farmer have to do? Spend all his time trying to stop people walking across his land, or you know? We need to be able to somehow get it out to the farmers that if this is occurring, then unfortunately they've got to take some sort of strong resistance to it, other than just, you know, put a fence up, and if it gets chopped down, it's hard luck. So, you know, it concerns me, this does. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Crooks. Are there any further speakers? I'm going to ask you and to do a call of the votes then. It was proposed by Michael Charlesworth and seconded by Dan Harrison. The recommendation is on page 7 of the report. So I'll hand over to Ewan now to cast the votes. Thank you.
Ewan, can I just interject? It's Mr. Phillimore.
Okay.
Just curious, Mrs. Page has stated that she's not in favour of this. Is she putting in an alternative recommendation?
Well, if I have a seconder, I will.
I'll second that, Chair. Ian Bentley, I'll second that Rosita's proposition.
Hey, Rosita.
I'm sorry, Chair. What is the alternative proposal?
That's what I was going to ask, Michael.
Well, it's quite simple. My proposal is not to accept the recommendation and to revisit the proposal to incorporate the footpath through the development, but not to include the proposal of the suggestion as set out in the recommendation.
Chair, I second that.
I'm just going to bring in Mr. Crooks to to try and help with the legal situation on this. Oh, well, Ewan will do it then instead of.
Yeah, so just to clarify the situation with the meeting procedure rules, a motion has been proposed and seconded to follow the officer's recommendation. Then Mrs. Page has proposed a motion, but because a motion has already been proposed, in effect, she's proposing an amendment to the motion. But an amendment can't negate or it can't remove the substance of the whole original motion. So it's not a valid amendment, I'm afraid. Amendment.
Can I come back, Ewan, if I may, please? It's quite simple, isn't it? We've got a recommendation in front of us. So the members who don't agree with it vote against it, and then it falls. And if there are more people who are for it, it's then accepted. So that is a simple solution. So forget about my amendment and we'll just vote for and against. That is quite simple and straightforward, isn't it?
Simpler. Okay. So the motion on the table is Mr. Charlesworth's original motion that the officer's recommendation be approved. So,
yeah, I mean, really, that's what that was what we're setting out to do, Rosita. It's really a for and against. So if Ewan will read out the names and ask which way they'd like to vote. Obviously, for is for the recommendation and against is against the recommendation. So it is pretty clear. So over to Ewan.
Okay, Mr. Bentley.
Against.
Charlesworth.
For.
Brooks.
Sorry, is it me?
Yes, are you for or against?
Against.
Mr. Gillard.
For.
Mr. Harrison.
For.
Mr. Gamble's not on the call. Mr. Licorice.
For.
Mrs. Page.
Against.
Mrs. Richards.
For.
Mr. Phillimore.
The desire line and usage says it's being used, so I'm for. Thank you, Ewan.
Mr. Sheehan.
For.
Mr. Wyatt.
Against.
So I make it that's carried. The motion is carried 8 in favour and 4 against. Does everybody agree?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. That's the conclusion then. The application is passed.
Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
Chairman, may I have a word, please? Mr. Crooks has made a very, very valuable point. And while we've got officers online, is there any possibility that through you, we can send something out to farmers or putting it on our website to make farmers aware what their duties and responsibilities are, not to find ourselves in this situation repeatedly? Thank you.
Yes, we can certainly ask Rosita. It's a good suggestion. I mean, Mr. Crooks did highlight the dangers, and I think that's perhaps a good thing to suggest. So the officers have our ears, Rosita. So hopefully they will go away and look at that.
Thank you, very much appreciated.
We move on then to item number 8. Planning application or an application by waiving to vary conditions of their planning permission, which they already have. I've got Katie Ferguson. Well, I hope I've got Katie Ferguson on the line to present the report on item 8. Katie, are you there?
I am here. Thank you, Chair. Shall I begin?
If you would, please. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. This application is submitted by Wavin and relates to the clay stocking site at Donington Island. This application is for the variation of condition 3 and 30 of the existing planning permission to allow for an extension of time to delay restoration and the submission of a detailed restoration scheme by 12 months. The Donington Island site is located in Ashby Wolds, which is to the south of Albert Village and northeast of Overseal. The nearest residential properties are located approximately 20 metres to the southeast along Spring Cottage Road. Access to the site is also from Spring Cottage Road. Currently, the basic restoration concept for the site is a low-level water feature and some woodland planting. As you can see from the slide, the application area is highlighted in red. Public rights-of-way are located within the vicinity surrounding the clay stocking site. This slide shows that footpath P39 runs along the southwest boundary of the site, with footpaths P22 and P23 running along the western boundary, with P23 heading northwards around Albert Village Lake. The application seeks permission to allow for an extension of time by 12 months to delay the submission of a detailed restoration scheme until the 31st of December 2021, and the overall restoration for the site to be completed by the 31st of December 2023. The application relates to the area north of the internal hall road only. The southern part of the site, which is to be retained until the 31st of December 2032, will remain operational as permitted and no further variations are proposed. The proposal also seeks to extend the date for retention of the clay storage area. As you can see from the slide, the area highlighted red on the drawing would be to the northwest of the internal hall road. The stockpiles in this location would be retained and gradually reduced but not replenished, and the stockpiles would be fully removed by the 31st of August 2021. This slide shows a photograph taken from the northeastern boundary looking across the northern part of the clay stocking area in a westerly direction towards the clay stocking piles. One letter was received from the public objecting to the application on the basis that final restoration dates should not be moved to suit companies' finances. No objections have been received from any of the statutory or technical consultees. The National Forest Charitable Trust supports the application, and although the National Forest Company does not object, it has expressed some concern about the slipping of the restoration deadline. The application is proposed due to the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on the volumes of clay planned to be removed in 2020, which has resulted in a large volume of clay remaining in situ. The clays are a valuable resource for Wavin and a number of other national clayware manufacturing companies who rely on the clays from Donington Island. Overall, a 12-month extension for the submission of delayed restoration scheme and for the restoration of the existing clay stocking facility at Donington Island will safeguard an important raw material in accordance with national planning policy and the development plan. It is considered that the importance of the clay stocking facility outweighs the delay in the restoration of the site that would result. It is considered that the various measures contained within the planning application, together with the imposition of conditions and completion of a legal agreement covering HGV routing, transfer of land, public access and aftercare management, would ensure that the proposed development would not cause an unacceptable impact to the local residents and the local environment. It is therefore recommended that the proposed development be permitted, subject to the imposition of conditions and the completion of a legal agreement. That is all from me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Katie. I'm going to go to the ward or division member first, which is Sean Sheehan. Sean, have you got anything to say on the application? Sean?
There we go, I'm unmuted now. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this site hasn't given me a lot of trouble over the years. It's been there a long time. We don't get complaints as such. I think people are used to it being there. It's well shielded from the surrounding local communities. So I haven't got a problem if the restoration just does slip another year. We've had this once or twice already in recent years, so it doesn't give me any great concern. I would ask though, with the routing, of lorries. We're just careful that we're not encouraging vehicles to go through Albert Village and that they're directed away from there onto the main roads. That's the only thing I would say, but otherwise I'll be happy to support the recommendations.
Thank you, Sean. I'm sure that the officers will have heard what you say about the lorries, Sean. I'll second you, Sean, on that. This my ward abuts yours in that area, and I agree. There've not been a lot of trouble over the years, and I don't think another year is going to really hurt. It is a valuable resource, as Katie has said. So I'll second you on that. Any other members wish to speak? None. No more members to speak. Well, I'll ask Ewan to do another roll call then of how we're voting. It's recommended to permit. So if you're for it, you're for it. If you're against it, you're against it. So over to Ewan.
Okay, Mr. Bentley.
For.
Charlesworth.
For.
Mr. Crooks.
For.
Harrison.
For.
Mr. Gillard.
For.
Mr. Gamble's not on the line. Mr. Licorice.
For.
Page.
For.
Gillimore.
For.
Richards.
For.
Ian.
For.
Mr. Wyatt.
For.
It's carried
I
unanimously.
think that's unanimous, that one, which is pretty straightforward. Thank you. We move on to item number 9 then now. I said previously that there's no urgent items, so there aren't any urgent items. The only announcement I have is the next meeting is on the 11th of February 2021, and wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thanks for tuning in again today.
Thank
you, John.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman, and everyone. Happy Christmas.
Cheers, John. Happy Christmas. Happy New Year to everybody.
Yeah. Happy New Year. Happy Christmas.